Hello everybody. So today I'm going to show you how to start up a TF-51D from a cold and dark environment. So first off, we're going to engage our battery and our alternator. So now we get power to our cockpit lighting and all of our other instruments. So we're going to turn our cockpit lighting down. Next we're going to engage our fuel shut-off lever so that we get fuel into the engine. And we're going to engage the fuel booster pump so we get fuel pressure, as seen here. Now we're going to press and hold the oil dilute switch for 5 seconds. And we're going to press and hold the primer switch for 5 seconds now. Next, now that we're ready to start the engine, we're going to flip the mags to both. And we're going to depress our pedals so that we hold the brakes on, so that when the engine starts we don't move forward. Next, we're going to flip the starter switch. And when we do, the engine is going to sound like it's about to ignite. And once we hear that, we're going to engage the mixture switch into the run position. And I have a switch bound so I can do this very quickly because it has to be done almost simultaneously as soon as you hear that ignition sound. So you'll hear that. And there we go. We have engine ignition. And so what we're going to do is we're going to keep this RPM gauge below 10,000 RPM. We're going to bring the prop up to max. Okay, prop is now set to full. And that sound you may have heard is the landing gears doors closing, as we now have hydraulic pressure. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring the flaps up. We're going to open the carburetor air control. We're going to fully open that so that we get cold air into the carburetor. And so we're just going to control the throttle, keep this RPM below 10,000 so that we don't damage the engine. We allow the engine to warm up so that oil in the engine starts lubricating. As you can see, our oil pressure is a little bit above the red and we don't want it up there for too long, especially if we were to run this at a high RPM. Alright everybody, so now that our engine has warmed up a little bit, we can now start to taxi the aircraft so we can do our taxi and pre-flight checks before we get to takeoff. So right now we are currently sitting on the ramp. Runway is a grass field out there. So what we're going to do in order to taxi the aircraft, we're going to pull the stick back to not only engage the tail wheel lock, but also make certain that when we throttle up, we don't cause the tail to lift up as much as possible. So we're going to do this in order to try to help keep the tail on the ground and our steering, which is our tail wheel, on the ground as well. So now that we are ready to taxi, we're going to release the brakes and we're going to slowly advance the throttle. As you can see, it doesn't take much throttle to start moving this aircraft. Now the way to maneuver this aircraft is a little bit of rudder, a little bit of toe brake. So right now I am going to depress the right toe brake a little bit. And you can see that with the tail wheel locked, the aircraft does not turn very tightly. In fact, it doesn't really want to move that much at all, which is very good when you want a very controlled turn. But right now we're coming up to an intersection where we need to make a very tight turn. So I'm going to slow us down here. And then what I'm going to do in order to unlock the tail wheel, I'm going to push the stick forward. I'm going to give it a little bit of rudder, a little power. I'm going to give it a little toe brake as well. And then in order to stop, opposite rudder, opposite toe brake, and we stop the turn. And now I'm going to pull the stick back in order to relock the tail wheel, and now we're taxiing. So now we're just going to taxi down here, and what we're going to do in order to see, we're going to move this nose back and forth with the rudder in order to be able to see beyond our nose. Because we sit in a nose-high position, it becomes very difficult to see in front of us. And so we need to wobble back and forth along the taxiway to be able to see in front of us. There we go, we still have a clean intersection. So we're still going to keep taxiing. And that we're at about a point where we can actually take off from this grass field, I'm going to turn us left into the grass field. So slow us down. Stick forward. Left toe brake, left rudder. Turn. Right rudder, right toe brake to stop. Pull stick back, advance the throttle. Once the tail wheel becomes centered, we're essentially locked forward. So now we're going to stop again. So now we can do a run up. So what we're going to do is we're going to power the engine up. About 25 manifold. And what we're going to do is, while holding the stick back, we're going to just end the brakes. What we're going to do is we're going to check the mags. We're going to look for a change. Make sure that both mags are good. Both mags are good. So now we're going to settle it down. We're just going to wait for that oil temperature to come up because it's still a little bit cold. So with the TF-51, she is a very easy aircraft to taxi. As long as you have toe brakes and rudder, you can pretty much counteract any movement that she wants to make to the left or to the right. It's very easy to control on the ground. With a wind or without a wind, it's not impossible to control. Alright, so now we're going to show you how to take off a TF-51 and how to do it. So what we're first going to do is we're going to set the rudder to 6 degrees of trim right. I'm going to manually do this with my rudder pedals, but the rule of thumb, 6 degrees right rudder input for takeoff. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that your prop is set full, so all the way forward. And when you advance the throttle, you're going to do so slowly. You are not going to punch it straight from its current setting of about 3 to 5% all the way to 100. If you do so, you will damage the engine. Now, because we're on a grass strip and it's a very short strip, I'm going to put in 1 notch of flaps to help get some more lift. Now, we can usually lift off at about 90 knots, and what I'm going to do on the takeoff roll once we start, I am going to slowly release the back pressure on the stick to neutral. And before we hit the rotation speed of around 85 knots, it should be completely neutral so that the aircraft's tail will slowly rise up, and as it does so, we can pull back a little bit on the stick so that it slowly pulls up. And we want our ascent to be controlled so that we don't end up in a stall where the nose is too high, and we don't want it too low where exactly as in we're going to have to yank quickly back on the stick and put ourselves in a very dangerous situation of wing stall at low altitude. So now let's close canopy. Okay, canopy's locked forward, so now we're going to advance the throttle. Okay, we got good power, stick back, brakes off, advance the throttle. As you can see, it doesn't take much power to get this thing rolling. We're already at 46, airspeed's alive, stick's going to go forward. 80, 90, go right stick, and we're already airborne. Gear up. Gear's in transition. Flaps up. Take the rudder out. Okay, gear is up. Flaps are confirmed up. And we are airborne and climbing out. And we're already at manifold 46. I'm just going to pull the RPM back to match 27 for climb power, 27,000 on the RPM gauge. And there we go. We're airborne. Oil temps are in the green. Carburetor's just a little cold. Coolant temp is fine. And that's how you take off a TF-51.